This is the Unit 8B Algebra 1 test review. First thing we're going to do is factor out the GCF and write our leftovers. So out of a 12 and a 3, we know that 3 will go into both of those evenly. They both have an x. The lowest exponent on the x is the 3x, or excuse me, the 1. So if we divide by 3x, we get our leftovers, and that's going to be 4x plus y. On number 2, we've got to think of the highest number that will go into 21 and 35. That would be 7. They both have an a. The lowest exponent would be a 1. And then the lowest exponent on the b, since they both have a b, would be 1. And then, so then we need to divide by that GCF of 7ab on both of these. So we end up with 3. The a's cancel out, and then b minus 5. The b's cancel, but we're left with an a. And on number 3, between a 15, a 12, and a 21, I think 3 is the highest number. They all have an x. The lowest exponent is 1. They all have a y. The lowest exponent is 1, so we can take out a 3xy. And then we divide by that GCF. I would recommend not skipping this step. We would end up with 5xy squared plus 4x squared. The y's cancel on the second one. And then finally, plus 7. For the next 5, we have to factor. So first thing you do when you factor is you always look for a GCF, which there's not one in number 4. So since it's a trinomial, we're going to multiply a times c, get 14. Now we need two numbers that multiply to 14, but add to give us 15. So that's going to be a 1 and a 14. I do like to go ahead and put my variable on those so that when I rewrite, I don't accidentally forget it. And then we're going to rewrite with 4 terms, so w squared plus 1w plus 14w plus 14. Once we have 4 terms, the purpose of that is for us to group the first 2 and the last 2. So out of the first parentheses, we can take out just a w, and then we're left with a w plus 1. Then the second parentheses, we can take out a 14, and we're left with the w plus 1. Remember, those parentheses should match, so we can write our final factored form would be w plus 1 and w plus 14. Remember, those can be written in any order, either w plus 1 times w plus 14 or w plus 14 times w plus 1. Let's look at the second one. There is no GCF, so I'm going to have to do the same thing. So I'm going to multiply a times c, so that's 1 times 20. Now we need two numbers that will add to give us negative 12. So in this case, I'm going to have to look. I know it's not 1 and 20. I'm going to try 2 and 10. And I know that multiplies to give me 20, but I need it to add to give me a negative 12, so I need to make both of those negative. And then it's m's, so I'm going to go ahead and put my m's so that when I replace that negative 12, I don't accidentally forget them. So I'm going to rewrite m squared minus 2m minus 10m plus 20. And now we can group first 2, last 2. So out of the first set of parentheses, one quick note, whenever you're writing your minus 2m minus 10m, please know that can go in either order. Okay, so if you did it a different way, we should still get the same answer. So out of the first parentheses, we can factor in m, and we're left with m minus 2. The second parentheses, we can factor out a negative 10. And we are left with m minus 2. So our final factored form would be m minus 10 times m minus 2. When we do number 6, there is no GCF again, and we need to multiply a times c, so that's going to be negative 6. And then we need two numbers that will add to give us 5. So I know I could do a 6 and a negative 1, and that would meet my requirement, so I'm going to go ahead and put an x on that. So then we have 2x squared plus 6x minus 1x, those can be written in either order, minus 3. Once we have our 4 terms, then we are going to group first two, last two. And then I'm going to take out of the first parentheses a 2x. So we're left with x plus 3. The second parentheses would just be a negative 1 taken out for our GCF. So divide by negative 1, and we're left with x plus 3. And our final factored form would be 2x minus 1 times x plus 3. Number 7, we've got to do the same thing. There is no GCF for number 7, so I'm going to multiply my a times c. So 3 times negative 7, negative 21. I need two numbers that will add to give me a negative 20. So those numbers, that is going to be a negative 20 and a negative 21 and a positive 1. I'm going to go ahead and put my x's on those and then rewrite. So we have 3x squared minus 21x plus 1x minus 7. Then we can group. At some point, you're going to feel like you're doing the same thing over and over, and that's because you are, just with different numbers. The first parentheses, we can take out a 3x, and we're left with x minus 7. The next parentheses, notice it's x minus 7, so I can just take out a positive 1. That's one of the few places that you can take out a positive 1. And you are left with x minus 7. So our final factored form would be x minus 7 times 3x plus 1. On number 8, this is the first time we have had a GCF. So we have to see what will go into all of those evenly. It looks like it would be a 30 to me, so I'm going to try it. If I'm wrong, I should be able to tell. So if I take out a 30, that means I'm going to have to divide all of these by 30. So that's going to be a 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. I don't see anything else in common in my parentheses, so I think I picked the right number. Then after that, remember, you can just, your 30, you just have to make sure that you include it in your answer. And then you can focus on factoring that trinomial. So a times c is 6. And then you have to find two numbers that will add to give you a 7. So that's going to be a 6 and a 1, and I'm going to go ahead and put my x with both of those and then rewrite. 3x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 2. Just a reminder, those can go in any order. And then we are going to group first two, last two. We can take a 3x out of the first parentheses. So we're left with an x plus 2. We can take a 1 out of the second parentheses, and we are left with x plus 2. So our final factored form, notice I've already got my 30 down there, is going to be x plus 2 times 3x plus 1. On number 9, it says the area of a rectangle is 4x squared minus 9. Determine the dimensions in terms of x. Well, the only way we can split up the 4x squared minus 9 is to factor. So in this case, you need to recognize that it is a difference of squares. There is no GCF in a difference of squares. You can go ahead and write your two sets of parentheses. And then you take the square root of the first term, which is just going to be 2x. Square root of the second term, which is 3. Square root of 9 is 3. You put a plus and you put a minus. Those would be the dimensions. It really doesn't matter which one you call the length and which one you call the width. Number 10, it says determine the length and the width of the rectangle below in terms of x. So we do the exact same thing, except this time we have to factor a trinomial, but it's just like we were just practicing. So we have to take our a times c, which is going to be negative 36. Find two numbers that will add to give us a negative 5. So I think that's going to be a 4 and a 9. I know one of those needs to be negative, so I'm going to make the 9 negative so that when I add them, I get the negative 5 that I need. I'm going to put an x with both of those. Then we're going to have x squared plus 4x minus 9x minus 36. And then group. Take an x out of the first parentheses. And then out of the second parentheses, we can take a -9. And we would be left with x plus 4. So our factored form is x minus 9 times x plus 4. So those would be the dimensions of that rectangle. On 11 and 12, we just need to determine those binomial factors, and those are just 4-term polynomials. So if there are no GCFs, I'm kind of looking at both of them right now, which I don't see any. If there are 4 terms, you can just start factoring. That was one of the first things, or the first way we learned how to factor. So you would group the first 2 and the second 2 and look for a GCF in both of those. So out of the first parentheses, you could take a b, and you're left with b squared minus 3. The second parentheses, you could take out a plus 5. And you would be left with a b squared minus 3. Our parentheses match, so we're in good shape. So our factors would be b squared minus 3 times b plus 5. And on the next one, I'm going to double check. I don't see a GCF, so I'm going to jump right in and group the first 2 and the last 2. So we can take a 3x squared is what I see in common in the first parentheses. So that leaves us with a 2x and then minus 3y. The second parentheses, we can take a 5y. And we would be left with a 2x minus 3y. So our factors would be 2x minus 3y times 3x squared plus 5y. On number 12, we're just continuing factoring. So even though there's 2 variables, your a and your c are in the same places. 1 is your a, 900 is your c, so you're going to put 900 on top of your t-chart. Remember the trick in your calculator if you need to find your factors. You need to go to y equals in your calculator, and you're going to put in the number that you need divided by x, and then look at your table. So I know that this is going to be 30 and 30, so then we need to put our xy with it because that's what's with our middle term. And then we rewrite x squared plus 30xy plus 30xy plus 900y squared. We got our 4 terms, so now we're going to factor by grouping. So the first parentheses, I can take out just an x plus 30y. The second parentheses, it looks like we can take out a positive 30 and also a y. So I'm going to divide by 30y. And our leftovers would be x plus 30y. They match, which is great. So our factors would be x plus 30y times x plus 30y. You also need to know that that can be written, since it's timesing it times itself, you can also write it as x plus 30y squared. Either answer is acceptable. On the next one, we're looking for a GCF, and we actually have one. We have a 2. So we need to take out a 2, and we would be left with 2 times x squared plus 6xy plus 9y squared. Remember, this 2 can just come down here and sit and hang out and wait till you get to your final answer. Then we need to start our process of a times c. So 1 times 9 is going to be a 9 on top of our t-chart. We need 2 numbers that will add to give us this middle term. So 6. So that's going to be a 3. We're going to have to put an xy with both of those. So we would rewrite as x squared plus 3xy plus 3xy plus 9y squared. Then we're going to group. And then we take out the GCF. So we're going to take out an x, and we're left with x plus 3y. We're going to take out a 3y. And we are left with an x plus 3y. You'll notice this one looks really similar to the other one. So we end up with x plus 3y, and then our other factor is also x plus 3y. Notice that 2 is right there with your final answer. On number 14, that is a difference of, well, it's not a difference of squares yet, but I do notice that there's a GCF. So I'm going to take out a 2. And we're left with x squared minus 9. Hopefully you recognize that that is a difference of squares. So I'd bring down my 2. Difference of squares is just a pattern, so there's really not any work to it. You just have to do your parentheses and take the square root of the first term, which is just x. The square root of the last term, which is 3 in this case. Put a plus in one, a minus in the other. It doesn't matter which parentheses you put your minus in. Number 15, I need to check for a GCF. The only problem is I'm looking at 13. So the only way this will work, and I'm going to grab my calculator and check to see if 78 is divisible by 13. So I checked on that, and it is divisible by 13. So I'm going to divide all these by 13. I know I can take that out. And then also they all have an a in common, and the lowest exponent is 2. And then they also all have a b in common, and the lowest exponent on the b is a 1. I'm going to have to erase and rewrite this because I'm not going to have enough room. Okay, that's a little bit better. So I'm going to have to divide by this 13a squared b under each of these. So we would be left with a 3, the a's cancel, and then b squared, plus 78 divided by 13 is 6, and then you're going to have an a, the b's cancel, then minus a 1, which you don't have to write, and then your a's are going to be a squared, and then b to the 6th after we subtract those. So your final factored form, there's nothing else that you can do but the way that this is written. So the only thing you could do to factor it was actually take out that GCF and you're done, okay? Because if your two variables are not in the same pattern as like number 12 and 13, you're not going to be able to factor it. Also notice there's a b to the 6th out here to the side, so there's no way you can do that. Number 16, you might want to pause the video and go ahead and factor that numerator. So you're going to factor that numerator, and you would end up with y plus 6, y minus 2. Okay, so hopefully you paused and you actually did that factoring. Should show it on your paper. And then you're going to keep your y plus 6 in the denominator. And hopefully you notice that these y plus 6, you have one on top and one on bottom, and they cancel. So if they cancel, your final answer would just be y minus 2. On number 17, we've given you a nice hint. It says, which is always a correct conclusion about the quantities in the function y equals negative x plus 3. The easiest thing to do is to put this in your y equals and then look at your table by hitting second graph. So I'm going to write down a few of the numbers since I don't have my calculator. So I'm going to write down some of the numbers from the table. So for instance, I'm going to start at negative 3. So actually I'll start at negative 4. So negative 4 and 7. So remember, I'm just grabbing these from my calculator. You should be doing the same. You don't have to write them down. You really just need to look at them in your calculator. So negative 2 would be 5. Negative 1 would be 4. 0 would be 3. 1 would be 2. And then we would have 1. And we could go through. It says the variable x is always 3 more than the variable y. Well, you can look at that and tell that it is that is not true, because it looks to me like in a couple of cases y is greater than the x, but that doesn't work out. So the answer is not A. B says when the value of y is negative, the value of x is also negative. Well, I guess I needed to keep going, so I'm going to give you a couple more. So at 4, it was -1. So this says when the value of y is negative, the value of x is also negative. Well, that 4 -1 disproves that. Then we have C that says when the value of x is negative, so we have a lot of negatives to look at for x, the value of y is positive. Well, you can tell that that value of y is only going up and they're all positive, so it's looking like it has to be that one. And then if we check the last one, as the value of x increases, so that would be going this way, as it increases, I know the arrow's down, but it's going in a positive direction on your table. The value of y also increases. Well, hopefully you can see that that's a decrease. Okay, it's going down as the value of x increases. So the answer would be C. On 18, it says the graph shows a relationship between the hours worked and the carpenter's earnings. Based on the data, which best represents the amount of money the carpenter would earn from a job that took 5 days to complete? And your hint here is to draw a line of best fit, and it really does. It's going to be, I'm going to do the best I can, but it really does need to be as straight as possible. So you may want to grab a ruler or your calculator cover or something. So that's not terrible. It probably could have been a little bit better. And then it says 5 days, so I'm going to go to 5 days, and I'm going to come up here to hit my line of best fit, and then I'm going to look over, and it's $1,250. Then 19, we just have to simplify. So I'm going to distribute. So that's going to be 5c cubed plus 50c squared. Then we're going to distribute again, -8c cubed plus 24c squared minus 4c, and then we have to combine any like terms that we have. So here's a couple of c cubed terms. So that's -3c cubed. Then we would have plus 74c squared, because those are like terms, and then minus 4c. On number 20, it says if 9x plus 12 equals 6a, then 3x plus 4 equals... a couple of ways that we could do this. If we wanted to solve for x, we could, but one thing that I notice is that if I took my 9x plus 12 and I divided both of those by 3, I would end up with a 3x plus 4. Well, that's exactly what we need over here. So if we divide this 6a by 3, we would easily end up that 3x plus 4 equals 2a. And 2a would be your answer. Okay? Remember, you could also solve this left-hand side for x and then plug it in to find 2a. You would get the exact same answer. On number 21, what would happen if you have a slope that changed from 2 to 3? Well, if you're going from a slope of 2, so that's going to be up 2, right 1, to a slope of 3, which is up 3, right 1, you know that that line is going to get steeper. Okay? If you need to draw a little coordinate plane and just start from the origin. So if I went up 2, right 1, it would be there. If I went up 3, 1, 2, 3, right 1, you can definitely tell that it is steeper. Then on B, it says the y-intercept was changed from 3 to -1. That means that it would shift down. Okay? And then if the slope is multiplied by -1, so if we had a positive 2 slope and we changed it to a -2 slope, we know that it is going to reflect. Then on number 22, it says Lady Gaga went on a shopping spree. Her bag was shaped like a rectangular prism with dimensions of x, x plus 2, and 2x plus 1. Write an equation for the volume, b of x, and then find those two, b of x and b of 19 over 2. So first thing we need to do is actually find b of x, and that's where we just multiply all three together. So we would have x times x plus 2 times 2x plus 1. And you need to decide, what do you want to multiply first? I'm going to go ahead and just distribute that x into both of those. So that's going to make that x squared plus 2x, and I still have to double distribute to 2x plus 1. Remember, double distributing, FOIL are all the same thing. So now if we simplify, that's going to be a 2x cubed. That's going to be a plus x squared plus 4x squared plus 2x. Write my b of x over here. So if we simplify b of x, that is going to equal 2x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x. And then that second part, all that's telling me to do is, or telling me what number it wants me to plug in for x. So on b of 5, if I plug that in, that's going to be a 2 times 5 cubed plus 5 times 5 squared, and then plus 2 times 5. To be honest, I would take this on the right-hand side over here, and I would plug that in my calculator exactly the way you see it, okay? Because there's lots of places to make mistakes right there. And you would end up with 385. So b of 5 equals 385. And then I would do the exact same thing, and I would definitely put it in my calculator because it's a fraction. So b of 19 over 2, if you remember that alpha y equals feature, makes your fraction for you. 2 times 19 over 2 cubed plus 5 times 19 over 2 squared plus 2 times 19 over 2, and you would get 2185. On the next one, it says a plant is 1 inch tall and grows at a rate of 3 inches per week. What graph represents this function? So if it's 1 inch tall, that's its starting point. That has to be your y-intercept. So it should start at a 1. That starts at 1. That does not start at 1. I think that one starts at 1. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. And this one definitely does not start at 1. Let me check my scale just to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. So I know it is not B or C. So then the only other thing is 3 inches per week. So we need to check the slope. So if I go up 1, 2, 3, right 1. 1, 2, 3, right 1. So D has a slope of 3. On 24, it says, graph the function with the given domain, identify the range of the function, and state whether the graph is discrete or continuous. Well, if it only gives me 4 points, then I'm only going to graph 4 points. So I know this is going to be a discrete graph. And then in order to find the range that goes with the domain, the easiest thing to do is put this in y equals in your calculator and then check the table. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to put in 1/2 x plus 1. Look at the table, and I know with -4 is going to go a -1. With -2 is going to be a 0. With 0 is going to be a 1. And then with 2 is going to be a 2. So I know my ordered pairs are then going to be -4, -1, and then -2, 0, then 0, 1, and then 2, 2. And I would not draw a line between it because it only gave me 4 points. Number 25 says, during a Carroll Dragon football game, the parents of football players sold hot dogs and popcorn to raise money for new uniforms. They charged $2.50 for a bag of popcorn and $2 for a hot dog. The parents collected $336 in sales during the game. They sold twice as many bags of popcorn as hot dogs. How many bags of popcorns and hot dogs did they sell? Well, first thing, and this, it gives you a hint that it's a system of equations. So the first thing that I see is that it was $2.50 for a bag of popcorn. So I think I'm gonna call that 250p. Then $2 for a hot dog, and I know they raised a total of $336. So that's gonna be $2.50 times the popcorn plus $2 times the hot dog has to equal $336 in sales. They sold twice as many bags of popcorn as hot dogs. And honestly, this is one that's a little bit weird to write. So I know that twice means 2 times as many. And then they had bags of popcorn, and then they had hot dogs. When it reads a little bit different like this, whichever variable comes between the operation, so either a times, a multiplication, or division, and the second one is going to go first. So it's going to be P equals, and then 2 times the hot dog. So it says they sold twice as many bags of popcorn as they did hot dogs. So I can check this, and I can say if they sold 1 hot dog, so if I let H equal 1, that means they would have sold 2 bags of popcorn. So I just checked myself to make sure that I was right. Now, this sets up for elimination, or excuse me, substitution. So I'm going to take this 2H and I'm going to plug it in for P up here. So 250 times 2H plus 2H equals 336, and then we just have to simplify. So that's 5H plus 2H equals 336, and then 7H equals 336. So if we have to do 336 divided by 7, we end up with H equals 48. So that means they sold 48 hot dogs, and then if you plug that in right here, popcorn is going to equal 2 times 48, which is 96. So 26, when Glamorous Glenda had her picture taken, PhotoPhil charged a $10 sitting fee and $6 for each sheet of picture purchase. If the total cost is a function of the number of pictures purchased, write an equation. Well, we're going to make this look like y equals mx plus b, okay? Because we have something that is charged per sheet. That's going to be like your slope. And then we have a starting price, which is going to be 10, which is going to be your y-intercept. So that's going to be y equals, then it's going to go up $6 for every sheet that she has purchased. And we know it's going to start at $10. What is the graph slope and y-intercept represents? Well, I kind of already talked about that. The slope is going to be the price per sheet, and then the y-intercept is going to be the $10. On 27 through 29, we're going to multiply these binomials. So I like to say double distribution. Remember, your teacher might say FOIL. So I'm going to double distribute. So that's going to be a 2x squared minus 2x plus 3x minus 6. And you always check to see if you can combine like terms. So 2x squared plus, oops, that should be a 4x. Sorry. So really, I got to go back and change that. Because if I don't, so that is going to be a 4x, because that's going to change my middle term to a minus x minus 6. Then if we double distribute this one, that's going to be nx squared minus 7x plus 5x minus 35. So x squared minus 2x minus 35. And the last one, the only little special trick about number 29 is because it is squared, you have to write it twice before you can double distribute. So you would say 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5, and then double distribute. 4x squared minus 10x minus 10x plus 25. 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. Number 30 talks about a savings plan that you put in $350 and earns 3% annual interest, compounded once a year. If you do not make any more deposits or withdrawals using the equation, and that's the growth or decay equation, how much will the account have in 4 years? So in this case, you have to remember that A is your initial amount, so that's going to be $350. And then since we are earning interest, we're going to say 1 plus this 3%, we're going to change to a decimal and say 0.03. And then after 4 years. And then you're going to put that in your calculator. So that would be $393.93. And then number 31, write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. So we know that is y equals mx plus b. So I need to find the slope and the y-intercept, and I'm going to count both of those things. So I can look at this and see that the y-intercept is at -1. I know it's y equals, and then my slope is up 1, left 1. So that's going to be -1, x. So it would be y equals -x minus 1. If you put the -1 in front of the x, that's no big deal. And then lastly, we need to graph this. So we start at 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Slope is up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, down 2, left 1. I like to go all the way down. Then you have to ask yourself, is it a dashed or a solid line? And because it's just the greater than and doesn't have the or equal to, it is going to be a dashed line. Then it is greater than, so you have to shade above the line. Remember, if you're not sure where above is, you might want to put your pencil down, make it a little bit easier to see, but that is above the line.